Hey, hi. Today is April the 21st. It is 4:45 in the morning. I think today is a Tuesday. We kind of get lost of the days here during this time of the pandemic and working from home. But that's pretty much what I do every day. So it's just another day, and it's another day for me to record. What are the strategies that I use to stay motivated and to have discipline as these days continue to pass on when we're working from home, when we're alone, when we're not really interacting with other people? And one thing I can talk about facing these challenges or creating new opportunities out of nothing is that sometimes the challenges we face have a very long timeline. That's something that I learned about while going through 26 years in prison. Is you've got to we've got to accept that there are some challenges that we don't have the ability to change. I didn't have the ability to change the fact that I had made some bad decisions as a young man, and a judge had sentenced me to 45 years when I was 23 years old. I didn't even know how to contemplate that. I didn't know how to think about what's going to happen that far down the future. And it wasn't only 45 years, it was 45 years plus an additional, I think, 7 or 9 or 10, I don't even remember, years that would follow that on what was called supervised release. So what I learned how to do was to celebrate little tiny achievements along the way. And that's the same thing that I am doing right now in building businesses. I don't focus on how much revenues are going to come in years down the road. Instead, I focus on, okay, if I lay out a plan and if I execute the plan, the chances are better that I'm going to get this result. But now I don't only have to focus on the result. Once I've crafted out the plan, that in itself can be an incremental goal. And that incremental goal, achieving it, brings me a level of confidence and it brings me a level of accomplishment once I cross that off the list. That is one of the strategies that I would encourage you to use. Identify what is going to be success in your life. And once you identify that success, map out that plan that's going to help you get there. It doesn't mean the plan is going to be perfect. It doesn't mean the plan is not going to have to, not going to have to tweak the plan. In fact, that could be one of the goals is that you're consistently assessing, well, how am I doing? Am I making progress? If I'm not making the progress that I want to make, what tweaks do I have to make along the way? If I am doing something and achieving something more than I anticipated, how can I leverage that success? How can I grow that further? When I'm going to would like to give you some examples of how I had to do that when I had a very big challenge to face, and that was okay. I've got to get through. I later learned that even on a 45-year sentence, I would only serve 26 years. But when I got that information, I hadn't been alive 26 years, so I didn't really have a reference point of what it would mean to have to get through that period of time. What I did know how to do was figure out what can I do in 10 years? If I could figure out what do I have to do in 10 years to be more successful, what does that look like? And so instead of focusing on 26 years, I focused on the first 10 because I could comprehend that. I was 23 and I remember when I was 13. So in those 10 years, I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a university degree. I'm going to become a published author and I'm going to find ways to contribute to society. But those are even amorphous goals, right? What does it mean to contribute to society? How could I define that? Well, defining contribute to society became becoming a published author. The third goal of mine was to find 10 people or find a group of people that would come into my life. And so what were the little steps that I would have to take to earn a university degree? That was very specific. What was the little step that I would have to take to contribute to society? For me, that becoming a published author. And for three, what were the little steps that I would have to take to bring 10 people into my life? Those were the very clear goals that I set along the way, the clear incremental goals. I knew that I would have to be working on them all simultaneously, but some of them I would not see the results for a long period of time. So I tried to focus on the ones where I could see the results. For example, the first step would have going to be, how am I going to get into school? I didn't have any money, and neither did I have a very good track record in school as a young man. I mean, I graduated from high school in 1982, but I didn't have the grades or the transcripts that would suggest I was going to be a very good student in college. And yet I knew that if I went to college, it would relate to my other goals. If I went to college and got a university degree, I felt that I would learn some skills along the way that would make it more likely for me to become an author. And if I became an author, it became more likely that I would be able to contribute to society in meaningful, measurable ways because people would be reading my work. And if people were reading my work, I would be transcending the wall and it would be more likely to bring people into my life. Not only that, but I would be able to leverage all of those different types of things to help them all grow. And in his book, Good to Great, Jim Collins used this analogy that I've always resonated with. And it was the story of a spinning disc. And he spoke about imagine a disc that is on a divot or a spindle, and it weighs, 1,000 pounds, I think is what he said, or maybe it was several thousand pounds. And he said, and get that disc to spin takes an enormous amount of effort to get it to first go. But once you start pushing and you start rolling, you start getting it going and spinning around, the disc itself takes on a momentum of its own. And so you can celebrate these little tiny steps because you know that with each little step, a new opportunity is going to open. And that's certainly what I found when I began this disciplined, deliberate path of setting incremental goals and celebrating the small achievements along the way. I learned that by writing to 100 schools, it became more likely to get into a school and overcoming the problems of not having money and not having an SAT score at all. And then once I got into school and I started to learn to develop my vocabulary, to develop my writing skills, and to develop my knowledge of how business works or the world works, it became more, I guess I would say, it became easier to start understanding the interconnectedness of humanity and how we all have to strive to become, build something bigger. And that's what makes a community. And it helped me feel as if I was part of a community. And the more I felt as if I were part of the community, the more people I could will into my life. And so I could keep that disc spinning. Well, today it's the same thing. All of us have to be building our lives. We have to be building our careers. We have to be building our relationships with other people. And to the extent that we can do that, we can grow stronger. Right now, as I am living with this new reality of, I think it's a new reality of millions of people working from home, millions of businesses trying to connect with their customers. I think about, well, what kind of value can I bring to those people? And when I contemplate that, I said, okay, what are going to be the incremental goals that I'm going to have to get to cross that line? And one of the goals that I had to achieve was to get this working environment set up. That was a goal, that because if I knew or I believed that if I got a dedicated working space, which is right now in my living room, you could see in the, it's, yeah, I've got a living room back there, a kitchen behind me, and this area that is supposed to be an informal dining room has really become our makeshift office. And if I could show it to you, my wife's desk is right next to me, and we're both working towards this goal. But without this, I wouldn't be able to achieve the little objectives that I'm trying to put forth. So what was next? Next was, after reserving the space, it was to say, okay, I have to get the equipment to buy, and then I have to learn how to use the equipment. And every little incremental step gives me a little bit higher level of confidence, including mixing this information, including teaching my wife how to help me along the way, including creating processes that are going to help me, keep a workflow going. And then say, okay, this is how we're going to start our day. These are the things that we're going to accomplish in the morning. This is what we're going to work towards in the afternoon. And then it becomes a matter of just executing crossing off the tasks and feeling stronger, because every day you're building a record. Well, right now, as I'm recording this, I have a, a content sheet where I'm showing, okay, how much content am I creating? And this today is my um, 60th piece of content that I'm creating since I really started to record it. But now I will use that tool as a case study or as a model to go show a prospective client. of this is what we can accomplish. We're not going to focus on getting the end result. Instead, we're going to focus on what are the tools that we're going to need to get started? What are we going to accomplish along the way? What is going to be the game plan going forward? How many episodes are we going to produce? What type of digital assets are we going to have to create? How are we going to use these tools to reach a broader audience and let the world know what we have to help them solve their pain points, their problems? And all of these incremental steps are things that we can check off. And when we're checking them off, we know that they're being checked off because of our own ingenuity and our own sense of engineering our pathway to success. When you can see that you're engineering your pathway to success, you can celebrate those little achievements along the way, because I know that I can do things today that I could not have done before I started to leverage this work. And then you can start to put a price on it and figure out, okay, what's it worth to do to get this on the other end of the scale? What is that worth? If I can map that out, now I can engineer a price point to that. So that's the strategy that I use to stay disciplined and energized when I'm working on a long tail project. And any type of digital type of product is a long tail project. You have to create a lot before you can build the credibility to get people to know, like, and trust you. And you have to be willing to say, I'm willing to do everything that I can to get there. That's the same thing I had to do while I was in prison. It's the same thing that has to happen anytime somebody is going to achieve something that is pretty big. When if you look at a skyscraper, you can see the finished product, you can see the windows, you can see the glass, the structural, magnificence of what somebody has created. But what you don't necessarily see is all of the incremental goals that had to be achieved along the way. But if you look back, you can realize, well, it all had to start with somebody doing some type of market study and figuring out what's the highest and best use of this piece of property. Then it had to write it up into some type of a structured plan. Then he had to get other people to believe in that plan and get financing for that plan. Then he had to use some of that preliminary financing, whether it was his own money, money from family and friends, money from early investors, whatever, to perhaps draw a more finished blueprint or rendering so that he could go get a tenant or a few anchor tenants for that property. Then he had to get them to sign preliminary leases or something along those lines and take those leases to a financial institution or a venture capital firm or private equity group and raise the initial money to begin building, because there's a lot of money that would go in to building a structure before they ever take in a dollar of rent. They may be spending $10 million before they even break ground. But eventually they have a plan. They execute their plan on certain timelines. They hold themselves accountable. And every time they achieve an incremental goal, they know they're closer to getting the final outcome. And that's what I would recommend you do. If you're going through a challenge or going through a struggle, think about what's the best possible outcome. What are the little steps that I have to take along the way? And the sooner you start crafting that model out, the sooner you can start celebrating the incremental achievements. Today, the incremental achievement I have to do is really create a blueprint or a map for somebody who is not in the digital space, somebody who's in the retail space, helping them understand that says, okay, if you invest in this, if you invest in this, if you invest in this, this is what you're going to have on the other side. And it's like building the machine. Once you have the machine, then you have to put fuel in the machine by producing new content all the time. And then you can send this out to your prospective customers who right now may be stuck at home and not know very much about the value that you can provide or the different ways that you can solve their pain points. That's what I'm going to be doing today. So the goal will be finish that up. And then when I go have a meeting on Wednesday with these clients, to show them this is what we have. That's the incremental strategy that I am using to build a business from home. And it's one that I hope that will help you as well.